I saw casting auditions for the first time and I thought, this is really fascinating. Like, what is this? People do this?
Okay.
I'm just like an actor. I'm out there trying to get the next job. Hopefully they like me. They'll hire me again and think of me as the chef. And I'm going to provide this amazing meal. And I want them to be really impressed and say, oh my God, all these dishes were so good. We can't even decide. This was amazing. Actors love PCAP. If they haven't done it before, they're so excited about it, especially if they've had stage experience. Theater background really, really helps in video game. We really do feel that we're here to enable the vision of the filmmakers or the game makers. Somebody fell out today and you needed someone on the set at 7 a.m. Like, I have it covered.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Actors Volume. I'm Jeff Berg.
And I'm Matthew Brzezina.
And together, we sit down with our friends, colleagues, and mentors to ask them about their journey, challenges, and the standards they set for success within the mocap industry. Now, I approach the interviews from an actor's perspective.
And I bring a production perspective to these conversations. Today, we're here at Rouge Mocap's Volume to introduce our next guest, Emily Schweber.
Now, Emily is a casting director who's been instrumental in my career. She was the one who introduced me to the world of video games and opened up opportunities that I hadn't even realized were possible until she cast me in Mirror's Edge Catalyst.
This was a really fun episode for me too. I've worked on a couple projects named Forspoken and Jedi Survivor that Emily was a casting director for, and I've been consistently amazed at the caliber and skill of the talent involved.
This episode is perfect for actors who are looking to break into mocap or video games, or anyone who ever needs to cast talent for a project. You'll learn about what makes actors stand out to Emily in their self-tapes, the value of relationships in this industry, and the importance of versatility as a performer.
So please enjoy our discussion with the lovely Emily Schweber. And if you've learned something by the end of the episode, please like, subscribe, and share Emily's story with a friend. Now please enjoy the show.
So Emily, thank you for joining us today. As we have discussed, this is kind of an episode where we have a chat with friends and colleagues. And Jeff has informed me that you guys have known each other for a long time. You and I have had some email correspondence, but I feel like this is the first official time we're properly meeting. And Jeff has said incredible things about you. Honestly, I've worked with a lot of people who have said incredible things about you. And I've seen your work by being very fortunate to get to work with so much of the talent that you have put on projects. So I've actually gotten to experience your work in such a pretty personal way that it's been a lot of fun. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's really good to be here. I actually looked back through my emails to see when I first came across Jeff. And I saw that it was probably 2014 when you were on some emails about auditioning for a movie. And maybe even before that. And then I found an email where you were my casting associate, and Sada Nia did a pre-screen session, and she's asking me how I like them, and then I answered some great auditions here, and she said, I'm glad, hope you would like a few peeps. And then I said, Ben R. and Jeff Berg were really good. And then 2 weeks later, there's an email setting up a callback session for the director with you. And then for a game called Pamplona, that was our code name.
Yeah, Mirror's Edge Catalyst.
That you were cast in.
Yeah, Emily, this has been really special for me to think about having you on here, because you were the person that, casting directors are behind the scenes and you don't get to see the person that brings this world together. And you're the person that introduced me to the world of video games. And I didn't know until I met you that I could have this incredible life as an actor creating video games. And I just wanted to take this public opportunity to thank you for the first opportunity, and just like the world that you've introduced me to. And just this business is such a difficult world where there's so many no's, and you're a person that has been in my corner. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to really truly thank you and say how much it's meant to me over the years. So thank you for being on the Actors Volume podcast today.
Well, I mean, I can only do that when actors are really good. And there were so many emails after these of setting you up for all different kinds of other projects. And also you had Msada on your side. She really liked you and
Oh,
would
great.
always suggest you to come in too.
Wonderful.
Did I hear you right saying that like your first correspondence was for a film audition?
Yeah.
Like,
And there were
I
other
didn't-
films that you came in on there, something called Juveniles. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
Tiger Hunter.
Yeah, I had no
Yeah.
idea that you guys met on film. I always thought it was directly video game and PCAP. So that's fun because you started. You started with film and TV, Emily, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had been a casting director on independent movies for probably almost 20 years before I started working on video games. And I mean, I think most of those years I could have been doing 8 to 10 movies a year. And
Wow.
then it started out, you know, a game here and there, and then a few more games. And at this point, I think I'm doing maybe 2 to 4 movies and many more games per year. I mean, every year is different because we're freelance, but
yeah,
it's kind of merged together a lot more.
Did you grow up in a place that had film production, or how did you kind of become
No.
associated with that? Because I grew up in a place that did not. Is that a
No, I
similar
didn't
case
think
for you?
about it at all. I didn't think about anything about movie production. I grew up in New Jersey, and then I came out to California. And when I came out here and I was 17, I decided I wasn't going back to New Jersey. And I lived in Northern California, and I was an art major. I was a printmaker. I majored in silk screening, and then I got into working for a silk screening company, a t-shirt design, a really great, young, fun company where I did printing, and then I worked in the art department. I worked in the darkroom, and then I got into sales. Our clients were rock bands and wineries and marathons and all different companies that, you know, needed t-shirts. And I learned a lot in sales that helped me as a casting director later. So I did that all throughout my 20s. And then when I was about 30, I got into a serious relationship. And then I was living in Marin County, first I was living in Sonoma County for many years, which is about an hour north of San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
And then Marin, which is about half hour north of San Francisco. And so I was living with this guy, and he wanted to be a movie producer. And he was learning how to do that, how to get into that. And he said, you know, I want to move to LA. And then I thought, well, I have to get into the movie business too. What am I going to do in LA? And I don't want to work in silk screening or in t-shirts anymore. So I started researching all the different aspects of being, I mean, he was helping me do this. He said, read this book. It's called The Movie Book. And there's a chapter on every single thing, from writer, director, producer, editor, DP, costume designer, casting. And then I thought, well, I don't want to go back to college. I definitely don't want to go back to school. So what can you do that you don't have to? I mean, there were no courses in it anyway. And then 2 things happened. One was there was a screenwriter, a big Hollywood screenwriter that he was pursuing to help get him projects to get into the movie business. He was somewhat in it, but not as a producer. And we had dinner at this guy's house. And after dinner, he said, oh, I have to look at these audition tapes. They're waiting for me to make a decision. I have to weigh in on the leads who are kids. I'm really sorry. Do you mind if I look at these? And then I saw casting auditions for the first time, and I thought, this is really fascinating. Like, what is this? People do this? Okay. And then shortly after that, I was walking around the Mill Valley Film Festival, and there were panels, and it's this outdoor, you know, it was in a park area, garden area. And I sat in on a panel of some casting directors talking about the movie River's Edge. And it had a teenage cast and how they were casting unknown kids and kids who weren't even actors. And then it really was a phenomenal cast. And then I was listening to them talk about casting. And so it sounded interesting to me. And someone suggested that I call casting directors and see if anyone needed an intern or an assistant. In the phone book is what we had instead of the internet then. And I called around and I found a woman who was just going out on her own. And she said, well, I can't hire you, but if you want to help me move into my new office, you know, and help me hang up headshots and things like that, So I started working for her in commercials, and
Mhm.
she's one of the big commercial casting directors up there. And then she taught me how, I worked for her for about 3 years, and she taught me how to cast extras. So then I learned how production works. I was on the set. I did extras casting coordinating. So I would get the list, what they needed, 3 background police officers, a minister, 5 passersby, the congregation or whatever. And then I had this file, and then I would get the extras organized, and I would meet them there and give them the rules. And so I really understood production. When we moved to LA, when my husband, he's my husband now, was my boyfriend then, got his first movie, I got the job of being the casting assistant to the casting director, to the LA casting director. So that's how I started.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. So how long was that like whole journey?
A couple
Sure, that you
years
also
in
had to
San
learn a lot.
Francisco, and then
Uh.
working for this casting director. I did a few movies with her, and then I worked briefly for someone else. And then I worked for a really terrific casting director named Allie Finn, and I was with her for like 10 years. I mean, that is a long time for a casting associate, but it was so rewarding and so inspiring. And she was my mentor, and I really loved her. And, we were a team, and she brought me into all the meetings, all the casting sessions. I ran the camera. She read with the actors, and I was like a fly on the wall. I absorbed everything. And I was just a part of the whole process, so I could see how it all worked for a long time. And then we worked on those movies, that are, you saw my resume, like Titanic, LA Confidential, The Matrix, Terminator 2, and
Couple small movies.
yeah, and we worked on small movies too. But after that, I developed my taste and my instinct, and by the time I went out on my own, I felt confident.
It sounds like through all that, there were multiple moments where you kind of jumped off into the unknown, and because it sounds like a good example of that is you moved to multiple locations. You even moved from New Jersey to California, and then as you were talking about, you saw a panel and you started talking to people. And that's something that I've had to learn as a skill, and that I know a lot of people have had to learn as a skill that doesn't always come natural, of like, kind of venturing into that space where it's like, I don't really have knowledge about this, but I'm interested in it. Is it safe to say that that's something that was kind of a skill set that helped you in all of this? And if so, is that something that came naturally to you, or did you have to kind of learn and shape it?
Well, the first thing was when I worked for Pangea, the t-shirt company, and the guys had suggested to me that I fill this spot where a salesperson had left. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I can't talk to people. I work with my hands. I get my hands with ink on them. And I'm an artist. And I was an artist up there, for a long time. But they really trained me and showed me how to do it. And I think because I was on the phone, they were phone skills. And they kind of taught me how to do it. And I had no problem making cold calls. I was able to do that. A lot of people were shy about doing it, but even though I'm shy in person, I was able to get on the phone and make all these calls and get more accounts until I did really well. So I think those skills of doing the kind of soft sell with casting, with sales, helped me. I had, in negotiating, which I, learned from sales, and that is a big part of being a casting director. And kind of, you're selling, we're appealing to the agents, and I've got to get jobs too. We're like actors.
Yeah.
So these jobs are short term, so we're constantly interviewing.
So it sounds like, because I will admit that I'm pretty, unfortunately, casting is one of those things. I've been involved with a lot of areas of production, but the casting side is still a gray box to me. So I guess how often, especially on like different scales of projects, like is a casting unit, like is there a team of casting? Because it sounds like, as you mentioned, casting extras is kind of its own separate job. So like on the different projects you work, do you mainly work alone? And in the projects that in the past, have you had like multiple casting directors involved in charge of like extras and leads and supportings, or how does that kind of shape up on projects?
Yeah. It's usually a pretty small department, even though it's one of the department heads on a project. So it's usually a casting director and a casting assistant or an associate, which is like a high level casting assistant. And we usually start pretty early on before other departments start. There's kind of a lead time. So we may start even before the project is in pre-production and talk about ideas and lists and who we're going to go out to. And sometimes there's nobody attached. Sometimes there is someone where they say, oh, we already have, this actor is going to be playing the lead. Or if it's a franchise, like a video game, it might have certain actors that are being carried over from sequel to sequel. And then we're adding on new characters. So there's discussion about it and understanding who those characters are and looking at the materials, which we're usually sent for games bios and kind of some mock-up drawings, showing what the character's going to look like in their, how they're going to look in the game. Sometimes they have some prototypes of different actors that they've thinking of who they're thinking of it might be similar to, and bios of their backstories. And sometimes we can share those with the actors who are auditioning, and sometimes we can't.
Oh, okay. I feel like having that information, especially being able to present it to people, helps a lot.
Well, ask Jeff. Does it help, Jeff?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the more information, the better. That's what I find, because I want to find a way to take the two-dimensional element of the character on the page and how do you bring this to life? So like the more biography, the more like active things that we can play, the better. That's what I find.
Yeah. So what I would say, what we used to do in auditions when we had all those pre-screen sessions on and on, meeting and talking, it was a private, closed room where I could say to you, well, this is some of the information that I've been given about the character. So let me help you with your audition by giving you this kind of confidential information that you can infuse into this scene. So now, since the business has changed a little and we're mainly doing self-tapes as the initial step, either I share the bio if I'm allowed to, or I don't know if you've noticed this lately, Jeff, is I'll put a note in the self-tape instructions where I'll say, if anybody wants to have a phone call or a Zoom call with me to discuss the character, I'm available. So I may get now some, 1 or 2 or 3 calls a day that are set up by appointment where you can ask me, an actor can ask me questions about, I'm not going to say what the game is. I'm not going to release any information that would, kind of sacrifice the confidentiality, but I may be able to give you a few things about your character that are going to help you when you go and do your self-tape. And I think the actors have been really appreciating it.
Yeah. I noticed that recently on the past couple auditions you've sent me, and you're the first casting director that I've seen do that post-pandemic. And one of the biggest complaints from a lot of actors is that people feel that they're kind of like in a vacuum. Like there used to be the instant feedback that actors need, that like that little validation or like something coming from a casting director. And you just opening that up has been, I mean, for me, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I've found that just such a great service. Even just a quick like 10-minute chat, like this is the relationship, this is the context, these are the circumstances that aren't in the bio. So I love that you're doing that. And I wanted to ask you, in terms of technology, like with video games, the tech is changing constantly. Now, of course, with the pandemic, a lot of casting is self-tapes and EcoCast, and I love the setup like that. I think it's been very like positive that you can bring in more people, and it's creates a better atmosphere for us. I want to know, does the technology in video games affect anything with your casting? Like the technology, Matt, like for instance, from when we started working together to now has just evolved so quickly. And I want to know if does that have any effect on the casting world?
I don't think so. I think that the casting process is the casting process. Whether you're working on, a short film or a commercial or a movie or video game, to a certain extent, it's starting with the material, understanding the material, sending out an initial process, doing an initial process of finding actors. And then my job is to make those selections or narrow down those choices to the ones that are going to go to the decision makers. And then oftentimes there's the callback step of that, which as it always has been. So it's, I don't approach it from the technology, I don't think. I think that in that way, that part of it is pretty similar to how it's always been.
I love hearing that. And
I
it
do
makes me
too.
think, like, are there any common misconceptions or myths about acting in video games that you come across from actors? And if so, like, how would you debunk them? Like, are actors coming in with an idea that the style of acting is any different, or their approach should be any different? Or
I mean,
what are things that you come
if they
across?
haven't done a game or they haven't auditioned for a game, I think sometimes I'll see like a really animated, a really cartoony kind of an audition. But I mean, as soon as someone has worked on a game or auditioned or gone through a callback or gone through pre-screen, and I would say, and most actors understand, or I may even say in the notes, this is like a film audition. The tone is very naturalistic. I'll give that note a lot for them to know that it's really not any different. And you can tell by the material, especially recently in the past few years, it's really relationship driven and it's really complex. And these scenes are dense. There's a lot of content in them and they're interesting and well written. So it's not simplistic. And I was going to say something when you were talking about the auditions. You know how we get the self-tape auditions and then you post them online, and then there's a space for actors to leave a note. And sometimes there'll be a note like someone telling me that they were an Army veteran, or they have weapons experience, or they speak a fluent language, or whatever applies. And then often, or not often, but sometimes an actor will put, I really enjoyed doing this audition. Please tell me if you have any notes or if you want me to do anything over again. And when I see that, I feel the freedom to contact them or through the agent and ask them to do it over again.
Wow.
And I am doing that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when people go into an audition, or when an actor goes into an audition, do you think I think I can tell the answer from you, but do you think that they should go in understanding and feeling like the casting director has their back? Because I know some people who go in and are very nervous and are afraid to ask questions, or are afraid to do anything that might put them on the chopping block. So I guess, like, how do you feel like people should approach an audition?
I actually wrote down here on the notes, ask questions.
Okay.
But I'm not saying that every single casting director is open to that. So what I usually do, and actually I think I did learn this from Tom Keegan, the great video game director and just great overall director, is he always says that in the auditions. Do you have any questions? Always. And if somebody, and oftentimes an actor might say, no, it's pretty straightforward. And we think nothing is straightforward. There is so much going on in this scene with every line, and why you're saying this and why the person's saying that, and what's going on here and what are you referring to. And it's such a missed opportunity, unfortunately. But I mean, we don't want to push people either, but he always gives, and now I always give the opportunity and say, do you have any questions? And then the question, if it's like, yeah, what's my frame? That's not the question that we're looking for. What happened right before this scene? What is their relationship? How long have they known each other? Have they been antagonistic toward each other in the past? What's really going on? Those are the kind of questions that I think would be helpful. And it's okay if there's no questions, really. Don't think that you have to. But if you have them, please do ask the questions.
Do you hear that, guys?
I didn't realize that
Ask the questions.
to ask questions until one time I had I always have, actors as readers, because I don't really especially like to read, and I like to watch. And one time I made that comment when someone left, and I said, oh, I wish they had asked questions. And then the actor said to me, well, is that okay? Because we're told that we shouldn't ask questions, like we shouldn't take up your time. I was like, you're kidding me. I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, I even see it sometimes when actors come to set. When I AD shoots, a big thing that I do before we roll is I make sure actors have all their questions answered. And there's a lot of times, especially when I'm working with somebody for the first time or when they're new, when they have questions that they wouldn't have asked if I didn't approach them because of that exact reason. And I've had to be like, it's like with the people we're working with, like they want you to have these questions asked and everything. But I have ran into that even when they get onto set where it's like a taboo to ask questions. And I'm like, no, it helps all of us, honestly.
Yeah. I noticed another thing when sometimes I sit in on the table read, before the video game. It might be like a few days before, a week before or something. And, they're mainly on Zoom now, which is fine. And that's like Tom would say after, if anybody has any questions, you can contact me, so that it's not the day of at the morning, when you're, when you feel that people might be in a hurry or there's no time, that a director, I think, will always be available ahead of time before a game.
Yeah, I've always found that to be the case on my end too, even on a technical standpoint, when it's not necessarily like relating to.
Yeah, and you guys do rehearsals too.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Most of the time, unfortunately, there are plenty of games where I've worked on where we don't get the luxury to have those dedicated rehearsals, and we kind of have to rehearse and shoot on the same day, which that's how it goes sometimes. But I always love rehearsals. I'm curious because I have a lot of specific questions about casting for the video game side of things, but I want to make sure that, because from where you left off in your story about getting like your first major chance to cast on your husband's film, like how much longer from that had it been since you've actually started working on video games?
When I got that job, I was the casting assistant. And I was working for a wonderful casting director who has since passed away, but she was old-fashioned in that I sat outside the room at a desk and in the waiting room, and then everything took place behind her closed door. So it wasn't. But this was my first job. I was just happy to be there. I didn't learn really that much about casting initially. That I learned about the paperwork and what I had to do to make the appointments and send out the materials, and everything was so new. I mean, that was plenty for me at that point. And I forgot I did do the extras on that first movie, but after that I didn't. But gradually, as you work your way up in casting and in that sort of apprentice process, then you do learn more about it and get more responsibility. So that you need that. Most people get into casting that way. I mean, some maybe, I know one producer for many years, she just had dealt with a lot of casting directors and been involved with the process on her movies. She was like, I want to be a casting director. And she just did it. She never was an assistant. Most people get in by being an assistant or an associate.
Yeah.
Many of the other assistants who worked for Mally Finn, before there was one, and then after there were many, are really successful and fantastic casting directors because she was such a teacher. She was very open. She wasn't one of the closed door kind of casting directors who kept everything to herself in private. She really enjoyed sharing.
So what were some of the big
asking me my
takeaways?
opinion also in the room.
Yeah.
So what did you like today? Well, what did you think?
So are those like, is asking like the opinion, like one of the big takeaways you got from her, or like what else did you get from her that you've kind of made as part of like your foundation?
I mean, she was really good to actors. She was so supportive and caring. If you had ever gone on an audition with her, it was like an acting lesson. She spent way more time with actors than I do. But she had been a teacher, an acting teacher, and she'd been an actress also. Even if someone wasn't right, they were never going to get it at all. She still spent time with them on their audition, perfecting it. She was very, very, very kind.
I've had people mention before, like sometimes when they get a casting opportunity, they kind of just see it as an opportunity to refine their skills and not necessarily like stay focused on the job or the character. And a big part of that is because if they don't get the casting for whatever logistical reason, because there can be a ton of them, they don't want to be like crushed, or they don't want to like put all their eggs in one basket. Do
So
you
like as a
think
defense mechanism, they're not
kind
going
of,
to try their best?
or at least they're not gonna like really, like they're not gonna put all their focus on it. Like they're already kind of thinking on to the next thing, to where it's like, okay, that was another casting that was done, time to look for another. But like, I guess when actors approach a casting, do you think that sort of mentality of like looking at it as like kind of an opportunity just to refine their casting skills is a appropriate way to um go into a casting room, or do you think that's not really beneficial?
That whole thing makes me sad. I
Interesting.
think that it should be an opportunity to meet a casting director, an opportunity to do what you probably moved to LA to do.
Yeah.
And that's what auditions can be, opportunities to keep sharp and just, hone your skills. And the defense thing about, well, I may not get this, so I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket is self-defeating, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
I think, there was a panel that I did this year for casting directors. It was through SAG-AFTRA, right? For actors. I think it was 3 or 4 Artios nominated casting directors. So I was part of that. And everyone was saying, we all said, we don't just look at it as the one audition or the one meeting. Like, I'm constantly going back. My past auditions are my gold mine. That is literally my only, besides my brain, that is my huge, big asset to being a casting director, to go back and think, okay, who are the good, who are the good soldiers, and who can play this character, who can play that, who are the people that spoke fluent German. I can't remember all that. So I've got to look back through all these auditions, and then I remember people, even if they didn't get the part, I don't care. I just want to go back and see who I can now bring in and, do a great job on this next game. So it's a treasure trove, and that alone could be a good reason to kind of do your best. And also, unfortunately, you never know when you almost got a job, when it was between you and 2 other people. And we don't have the time to go back and tell everybody that. So you could have come really close to getting it, and you didn't know it.
Yeah.
That you were in all these intense discussions about who was going to get cast.
I love that answer. That's really refreshing to hear. Because I've genuinely, honestly wondered whenever I've like heard that, or when people have given me that advice. I'm like, I mean, I can see their point, but it's really fresh and good to hear it from your perspective of being on the other side.
I don't think it's easy. I think I'm sorry, it's a terrible process that I don't know how we really perfect it, but I think it's really hard, what actors do. I just always feel, if somebody is nervous, or, all these things that are going through your minds about what you should and shouldn't do. And, it's really, really hard. I understand that, but it is the way that we have, and it is kind of like your job in a way. That's what you are here to try to get work, and that's part of the process, right?
You mentioned like there are times when people are really, really close, and it's just a decision between like them and another who are up for the role. When you find yourself into those positions, what are kind of the questionnaires that you go through, or what aspects do you look at when you are trying to find that perfect role or character or actor for that character, and you have 2 great options?
My job is to present options. So there are different ways I go about that. I'm not going to always present exactly the same kind of options. I have strategies about, yes, I may try to recommend or kind of give information that may help them make a decision, or the way that I might present it and the order that I present it. And I'm very careful about, I look at all the actors' photos, and then I pick the ones that I want to be attached to their profile, and I listen to the different takes, and I pick the best takes. So I'm trying to present the actors as well as I can. But
so would you say like your focus is to really, as you mentioned, make the actors, present them in the best way possible and give the best options to?
It's kind of like, think of me as the chef. and then I'm going to provide this amazing meal, and I want them to be really impressed and say, oh my God, all these dishes were so good, we can't even decide. This was amazing. We love you, Emily. You know?
Chef Schweber.
I mean, I want my
That's your new
that's why
name.
we're in it for this. You know, I want my appreciation and my praise, and I want them to think that I'm amazing with the choices that I've presented to them.
Yeah.
And then I go away, and you know, it's their game, it's their movie. They're the ones that they have, you know, also have a lot of information that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
facial qualities are going to work for the art director, and you know, all that kind of thing. You know, all the vocal, you know, a lot of other things that I'm not, that I may not have an understanding of.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to some of the logistics that I ran into. That, I mean, there are times when, like, if the character model that the actor is going to be playing is potentially 1.5 feet taller than the one of the actors that they're looking at, but it's only a few inches shorter, or another actor is a few inches shorter. I've ran into scenarios where they'll go with that actor who's a few inches shorter because it can save months of post work to be able to where they don't have to make those corrections. And like, I ran into logistics like that where that never popped in my mind until I started working on the technical side. So, and you've made it really clear that like a casting director is a huge asset to an actor, and that you provide fantastic options for the directors and so forth. Do you feel there are any other like strengths or benefits of having a casting director on a project? Because not all projects have a casting director or feel like they may need one. So kind of what are your thoughts on that?
One of the things about casting is it's very officey. I mean, you have to kind of not mind. It's a lot of computer work. It's a lot of organization. You know, it's a lot of going through submissions and sending out appointments and looking at things. And I mean, who wants to do that? You know, I mean, if you're not in casting, you know, that's something that I feel that we can provide, or sort of free up the you know, the directors or whoever, the producers, from having to do all that, so that they can do their creative work. And that is part of what we do. And sometimes it can be boring, or I mean, I don't mind doing it, but you know, and it's not for everybody, but there is a lot of that. And it's really nice to present a very organized sort of a presentation for them. You want to, you know, be very tidy about it and thorough. So there's a lot of that. So I think that is one of the things. And so there was a project this past year where the producer said to me, okay, give us a quote for, you just get all the auditions, and we don't pay you to go through them, and you just send them all to us. Or give us a quote for, you know, you get all the auditions and you vet them, and then you send us your recommendations. And so they picked the lesser amount of money. It was, I mean, I did go through them, of course, anyway. But I mean, I think they just weren't ready for how much material it was and how to go through it and really determine. It was pretty overwhelming, I think.
Well, on the
to
topic
see
of
all the different auditions, and some that I would not have wanted to show them because they weren't right, and maybe they weren't what they were asking for, or the right age, or maybe someone who needed a little more experience. That all those things.
When you're talking about this wealth of information that you have to deal with and sift through, I know in video games that character rosters can be immense. And on, say, like a AAA title for a video game, how many characters, or like if you remember a specific number from a specific project, like if they come to you, how big is that roster of characters that they normally present? And if it is a large roster, how do you sift through, like, what's your process of sifting through? Do you focus on like side characters first and then like supporting characters, or do you go straight for the leads?
Yeah.
How do you
Well, I mean, this is just what I do. I don't know what other casting directors do. And it also depends on if they say, we want you to cast these 3 leads first, and then in 3 months we're going to do the supporting roles, but and how many characters it is at a time. But I like to work on the leads first, and in a movie casting, that's always what I do. But okay, let's talk about a game. So if it's a character that's a more like 35 to 40-year-old special ops forces, guy. And that's something that there's a lot of, there could be a lot of options for. And it's an important game, a AAA title. I might, I might request, between 150 and 200 auditions.
Wow.
I'm just looking at Jeff because he's like his competition.
It's not
but
just
then,
what?
But then I might only send 40, okay, or less, depending. And then maybe they will call back 6 or 8. So that's kind of a typical but then there are other roles there are not that many options for. If it's something more specific, like someone who speaks Thai, let's say, then I might be able to get between 20 and 40 initial auditions, and then maybe I'm going to be sending 10 because it's just a smaller pool. Yeah. So there's all kinds of characters and all kinds of accents and languages and vocal qualities and all kinds of things. It's kind of never ending.
No, I can imagine.
Think about Witch, the project that we worked on.
Yep.
That those were very, very specific kind of, queen villain slash, supernatural characters.
I think Witch is a great example. And I'm sure that you've also ran into other games where some of the things you have to cast may not be humans, or may be creatures, or may not be able to audibly speak. So have you ran into scenarios like that? And how have you kind of tackled those challenges? Like, what do you look for when people are walking into the room, or what do you hope to see?
I mean, now they're not really walking in the room, but I think that I do rely heavily on the voiceover agents and the voice actors that they represent, even though those actors could also be theatrical, work in film and TV, but have the specific skills and have done character voices and creature voices and, work in animation. And, for those kind of, depending on what the client wants, but the aliens or those kind of characters, like a Star Wars game, then often the really experienced voice actors are going to really bring a lot to that, and they're doing performance capture. And it's not just their voice.
So I can imagine you're watching all their body movements and all that fun stuff when they walk in, or you have an extra magnifying glass on them.
I mean, they know that everything, it's head to toe acting.
Are there any, and this can be outside of the realm of video games, but are there any particular castings that you're like particularly proud of? And if there is one in particular, like, do you remember that moment in the audition that made you be like, yeah, this is this character?
I worked on a film that I'm really, really proud of that came out in theaters. And the process was very moving. It's a story of a transgender woman who goes back home after being away for many years. She was kicked out. And because her mother is ill, when she comes home, the mother doesn't recognize her. And it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful script. There aren't that many leads written for transgender actors. And the auditions were very personal because we were, hearing stories, about how the actors related to that story. And so I'm just very proud of that movie. It's called Monica. And it premiered at the Venice Film Festival last year.
You talk a lot about casting film, and I'm just curious, since you've done so much film and video game and TV, like, what do you see? Have you found like certain strengths and weaknesses in like casting for either or? Because I know, for example, with Jeff and I, we always run into actors and we talk to actors who like love PCAP or love film. So are there any like specific things from like casting in those different segments of the industry that you have found each have their strength and each have their weaknesses?
Well, I mean, I do agree. Actors love PCAP. If they haven't done it before, they're so excited about it, especially if they've had stage experience. And I think that theater background really, really helps in video game. What I bring to it, I think that is an asset for me as a casting director for games, is that I do because I'd worked on so many movies and I'd met so many actors and have kind of a large knowledge of actors, that I just think about it in terms of who's good, who's good, who's going to be good in this role. And I have to, explore that. And I bring actors in from all these years of working on film. We rely on the agents, but I mean, I think I also think of ideas that of actors that weren't submitted and go back through movies and games to do that.
Emily, I wanted to jump back a little bit. You had mentioned the wonderful Tom Keegan earlier, and I've heard you share this amazing story about how you guys met at your daughter's school. And it was funny how Tom had expressed that he had done his own casting at the time. But now you guys have this incredible, years-long collaboration. You've worked on so many projects. I've been so grateful to be a part of a few of those projects. I wanted to know, first off, if you wanted to share a bit of that story of how you met Tom, that would be great. But also, there's so many casting directors out there, and I wanted to know, what is it with your skills, or what do you bring to the table that makes you so well suited for video games, and why Tom chose you? What? How did that relationship?
I don't think it has anything to do with video games. I think it has to do with me. I'm very calm. I'm not a drama queen.
Yeah.
I think I have encountered so many situations in casting and emergencies, and at this point I feel like I'm like the Harvey Keitel character in Pulp Fiction, who's the cleanup Mr. Clean guy, whatever his name is, the wolf. Well, I can just come up, if somebody fell out today and you needed someone on the set at 7 a.m, I have it covered.
Yeah.
I can pass that. Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to work with someone who's going to panic. I may be, maybe scared inside when I get a new job, how am I going to live up to the responsibility of this franchise? But I can approach it and do it, and just make people feel that I can take care of it. I think I have that. Yeah. And I think that with Tom, I mean, it's something I can tease him about, but he loves casting. He can absolutely cast all his own projects without me. But I think that what he maybe didn't realize initially was that all that work, that behind the scenes work, confirming the actors, let's say you have a session and someone's supposed to show up one every 15 minutes. He didn't used to confirm them. So maybe he would sit there and maybe 3 actors would come at once and then no one would come for an hour. And so again, it's that organization of trying to make it easier for the director and the producer so that it goes well. And me bringing in the ideas of actors that he didn't know about because from all the movies it, I think that it just freed him up so that he could do all the creative part, the fun part, the casting sessions, and work with the actors and not have to do all the shit work. But yeah, that was an amazing turn of events that I got to just meet him coincidentally, and it really changed my life.
That makes me wonder, because from everyone who I've worked with who knows you, Emily, they've only had wonderful things to say about you and your work, and it seems, and that's both not just crew but also the cast that I run into as well. And it seems like you have a lot of these close relationships, or at least you focus on having a good relationship with people and work with people you do enjoy working with. And is that something that you've always kind of done in your whole journey, is stick with people that you really enjoy working with? And if so,
I mean, I want to, but I don't really have control over it. I hope that I can generate loyalty and have clients that are going to hire me. But it doesn't always happen. It's, sometimes clients want to try someone else, go in a different direction, go with someone who's more of a superstar. So I'm just like an actor. I'm out there trying to get the next job. Hopefully they like me, they'll hire me again. And, of course I get my feelings hurt if I see that someone hasn't hired me again, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. I'm happy to be working and feel very grateful.
And you also are independent in your work as well, correct? Which is something that, not everybody is, or that people are afraid to, hop into like the independent freelance market.
I
But
think
like,
it's just a matter of what suits you. It's, I've
okay.
had casting associates who said, I want a staff job. I don't like this, the way that I work, which, and many casting directors work, which is freelance. So you have a job and then you don't know where your next job's coming from, or you may have a couple jobs at once, or, have slow periods. And so the option is to work for a network or studio or a game company and work in-house so that you're always working with them and working full time. And but you're on a salary. But what I like is I can work with a lot of different people for shorter periods of time. And so if it's, not great, it'll be over soon. If it's great, then I've made new friends. And I can also work according to my own hours. So a lot of the work I do is at night.
Yeah.
I can leave when I want. I've had, could raise a child and, do that, kind of no one would know if I left and needed to pick her up. So there's something to being independent because I'm kind of my own boss in a way.
Yeah, which that always helps. It's always nice. I'm curious too, because one thing that we run into a lot when Jeff and I talk to people, and we have this conversation with actors, with crew, with everyone, but like with this industry, it can be really intense sometimes, whether it's a deadline or just the amount of work that you have to do. And you've already mentioned with casting in general, there's a lot of logistics that go into it that not a lot of people may realize or consider. And like in the casting area, is that also something where you have periods of just really intense work that you have to get through? And like, is burnout also something that people potentially run into in the casting sphere? Whether it's you personally or whether you just know of other casting directors or people within the industry that you may have seen, hit those phases.
One thing I always said, to anyone who ever worked for me was I said that they're not going to work at night. Like we're not going to, I think if you work in television on a series, it can be a lot of last minute stuff and you never know when the script's going to come or they change the character and you're often working at night. I don't think I've ever had a casting session at night. But yes, will I have dinner and then go and then work at my computer and listen to auditions? I figure it out. Yeah, I work on the weekends, but I don't really mind doing that. It's I have a life. I'm not gonna, especially in casting and some of these other jobs where we really do feel that we're here to enable the vision of the filmmakers or the game makers. And we're here to, just the way that I was trained and many of us were trained, when you're working on a set, we're constantly very aware of totally being there and giving 100%.
Yeah.
So we want to do that too, but, not at the expense of your health.
Emily, I feel like on a lot of these podcasts that I represent, like the actors who are out there that maybe have never done video games before, people that are either green in the industry or seasoned actors that have worked for a long time but have never worked in video games. And I wanted to ask on their behalf, is there anything that you wish actors knew when they were coming in for auditions, or in terms of their preparation or what they brought to auditions and self-tapes? Is there anything that jumps to mind in terms of advice you would give to actors, or reminders that you could give, things that you could tell actors and say that, it's going to be okay, like out there, if you bring this to the table?
I mean, I think I'm very forgiving. I don't care what the background is or what anybody wears or if they're using props or not, that kind of thing doesn't really matter. It is really more about finding the character and understanding the scene, and listening in between to the other person is just as important. And one just practical thing that I was talking to an actor about yesterday was specifically for video games. This character was being brought to this place where there had been a massacre, and kind of then looking and then having an argument with someone who had a different point of view about it. Kind of like the opposite of the scene that you did, I think. And she started just, with the sides and then looking up at him and looking up and down. And so I suggested, walk into the frame, look around. Oh my God, there's dead bodies. What happened here? It's like horrible. Stop. And then look at him and say, did you have anything to do with this? Or whatever the first line is, create a little bit of the scene. And at the end of the scene, she says, never again. And next time I'm going to walk, and then walk off the frame instead of looking at the camera, smiling, or then the camera goes off or something. Like, give us a little bit of what's happening in the scene. If someone hears a helicopter, take that moment to hear it. If that's what's happening in the beginning of the scene.
That's great. So really creating the environment.
Create a little bit of the environment.
Yeah.
It can just even be, something small.
Yeah.
Like there was another character that he's kind of like talking to a prisoner, and he had just like a stick or something. And in the scene, he was going like really slowly, like hitting his hand with the stick. It was really threatening. Just can be something small like that.
Yeah.
That's something I've seen in the mocap volume, especially when actors are given a lot of free reign, because you're in an empty volume and you're interacting with a lot of like wood pieces or blocks or stanchions with a tennis ball on it. And I just remember getting animations, and there was an actor who, a lot of actors, we had stanchions set up, and a lot of people were kind of thinking of them as like inanimate obstacles or like trees that they were weaving through. And then there was one actor in specific who went up and actually made them people, and like made it as like part of a crowd, and gave an inanimate object life. And it was just such a compelling thing to see, and it was just such a different thing to see. And I'm like, that was a really good choice. Do you run into those moments a lot? And you mentioned the guy like using the stick to create that threatening ambiance, but like out of all your years of
yes, sometimes
being a casting
someone
director,
will do something really creative, like shoot themselves outside running in between the scene. Maybe it's like there was where it says he ran down the alley or something. You just ignore all that stuff, and that's fine. You're not supposed to follow the stage directions. But then like he did a shot of himself running down this alley, and then it cut, and then he had his next lines. Like it was just like a little in between thing that was shot and edited in this audition. I like that. I like that kind of thing.
I've loved this conversation, Emily. This has been a blast. I know we're pushing up on our hour, and I still have a lot more questions that I would love to ask.
We can do a few more questions.
Great. First, Jeff, do you have any that we haven't like gone over yet, or anything in our past conversations? Because I know I've been doing a lot of talking, so I just want to make
I
sure.
think I would love for you to ask the other ones you were thinking. Yeah.
One of the biggest ones is, which we've touched on a lot of aspects, but I haven't asked it directly, is like, as a casting director, when you're given a job, regardless of how big or small it is, what are just some things that people can provide you? Like whether it's the director themselves, whether it's the video game company, like what are things that you get or don't get that help you or could just allow you to really, make your work shine even more?
Okay, I just thought of something when I was going through the emails, that had to do with Jeff and all the auditions. And there was an email where you had sent us chocolate.
As a thank you. Yeah.
As a thank you, we were send a thank you email.
Bribery.
Thanks for the time. Yeah. I remember we used to have a sign in our old office that said, we accept chocolate.
Yeah.
But when you said anything that would help you, well, no, that just but that was very nice.
Jeff, you're such a ham.
Yeah.
Help me.
Something that would help me that actors do, that could do. I do think for games, it really does help to have them be off book. And it's not something that we're supposed to ask. And it's not something that I would insist on, because I know you guys have so many self-tapes to do and, so much to do. And I'd rather have someone ask me for more time before past the deadline than be reading it. It's just really hard. I don't think I can present on this level of game with enough people memorizing these auditions to present something that's not off book, where you're really, reading it and then like glancing up. It's got to be, there's got to be more, we've got to see more eye contact than that.
That's a really great note.
Yeah.
Is there anything from like the technical side? Because one thing is like, I know, speaking on like getting games or getting a video game shoot ready, there's so many different resources like concept art, like 3D models. Is that ever stuff you get?
I get some drawings to kind of help me visualize the character. Especially like when we were working on Star Wars and it wasn't going to be a human character. But I don't think that anyone needs that stuff until they've been cast.
Okay.
I may help someone by saying, I don't think you have the right take on the character. Picture yourself all in black leather. I don't know. And then someone might say, oh, okay. I get it.
No, I love that note. I'm curious too, because something you mentioned earlier, like when you were talking about that film that you cast that you were really proud of, you mentioned that you loved the story of it. So like, do you usually just get the lines of the characters, or sometimes do you get like the full script?
No, I always get the full script for film.
Ah,
We're
okay.
working from the script. That's the first thing I get. The full script on a game is something very different from the film script. It's got all the different, it's got all the, I forget what it's called. There's
all the gameplay segments.
Yeah, all the gameplay, exactly.
Yep.
They're really long, and all the different possibilities where they can take the character. So it's not something that that I think I'm very good at getting through or reading.
The other question that popped in my head when you were telling that about casting for that film is, when somebody walks in or hops in on a Zoom call, whichever way it is, because we've talked a lot about the character and obviously, but again, you mentioned that you just loved that story. So on scripts where, the story really comes to life, right. How do you, like when somebody comes in, how much do you weigh the story into the casting?
Okay.
Or is it just solely focused on character?
I mean, something like that, and actually the casting of it was done 5 years ago. That's how long it took that movie to come together. Monica is the name of it. Patricia Clarkson played the mother. She was amazing.
Great.
So my personal taste when it comes to film, and I'm very into independent film. That was more of an art film. It was a very deep, character-driven story that was, kind of, didn't have a ton of action in it, but there was a lot happening in it between the relationships and people's feelings. And I had worked with this director before. He's very, very special, an Italian director. So bringing something like that to life and helping interpret what is going to be on the film is something I really, really enjoy. And when it's time for the Independent Spirit Awards, which I vote in, and I try to look at all the movies, even all these little movies that you're never going to see or hear of, and a lot of them aren't going to come out. I just love those kind of dark stories or quirky stories. Or, I worked on another movie that is called Four Samosas, and it's got an all South Asian cast, and it's just like a wacky comedy that all takes place in Artesia, the Indian American neighborhood. I mean, it goes, you get like a vision of this world, and it's really, really fun. That was a great movie to work on too.
Matt, you'd mentioned about what actors could bring to present to you that would help, and it made me think of demo reels and footage and materials and that kind of stuff. And I know how important it is for casting directors to have a visual look at what actors, like how they look on screen. How important is it for actors to have a mocap, PCAP, video game specific reel, or does their demo reel for film and TV translate over to video games, or how do you feel about?
So sometimes lately, especially, when you submit your self-tape to EcoCast, and sometimes actors attach a mocap reel, let's say. And I think that's good to have. You don't have to have it, but I mean, if you have or an action reel or a fight reel or something like that, if it pertains to the character, I think it is a good thing to show. And a demo reel if it's good. So, when we get the submissions, a lot of times actors will have demo reels on their breakdown services profiles, and a lot of times they won't. And so I really heavily rely on those demo reels, because as I'm trying to figure out who to audition, I may want to kind of take a brief look at them, and that's the only way that I can do it. And I might want to hear their voice or see what their presence is like. But then I didn't know until recently that there's an extra charge for actors, and so that's why a lot of actors don't have their demo reels on there. But it does help me a lot if they are on there.
That's a good question, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff, are there any more questions that you have on your end?
I mean, are you okay with actors trying to stay in touch with you, or like I know you're back in the day, actors used to send headshots and resumes in the mail. Do you like staying in contact with people? Do you like being kept up to date with what their recent play that they're in, or film that they did, or what's the best way?
I do have a kind of a dedicated email address that is on that website. Someone can reach me, but if I don't know you, it really doesn't. I work primarily through agents. It's just so much easier.
Or send chocolate, right?
Yeah. And then the last thing Jeff and I like to do, Emily, is we always like to kind of open the floor up for you, if in case there's anything you want to, I guess we always like to ask people if there's any specific thing that they have come to realize, or a perspective that has shifted, or just general knowledge. And it can be reflecting on something you've already said in the interview, but like we always leave the floor open to express like a takeaway.
What I find is, like, I don't know it all. I've worked on so many projects, a lot of movies, especially, a number of games. And then I find that something will happen that never happened before. And I'll something that I've learned from it. I might make a mistake and then realize, well, I can never do that again, or something that'll come up. It's just, a process that we're all learning from. So every single project, there's something new that seems to happen, which is a great part about it.
No,
it's not boring at all.
I 100% agree with you. Well, awesome. I think that's a great note, Emily. Again, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, indulging us in our questions. It was honestly a blast.
Yeah, so wonderful to hear.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.